Hey everyone, so this is Harrow, Season 3, Episode 4, called Per Stirpus, Latin for by roots. So we see this man running through the woods, being chased by someone else with a gun, and then being shot. This is the beginning of the episode, the very first seconds. Then it jumps to the medical examiner's office where Harrow is just finishing up an autopsy. And is then, asked by Fairley to talk with him in private. So Fairley's like, are you ready for this camping trip that, you know, um, that I told you about? And, Harold's like, well, he clearly doesn't want to go, but he's having to go anyway. And it's Fairley manages to get it cleared with um, their new boss, Renee, and um, so now he's having to go on this trip. um, that night, he's looking at photos of James, um, and then some photos of his father, and it's those pictures look very photoshopped in my opinion. They look very photoshopped, like James deliberately did that. Um, I don't know. That's what it looks like to me. Um, so I'm still very wary about this James dude. Anyway, the next morning, Harrow shows up at the spot that Fairley uh, is to meet him at, and Nichols shows up, um, and they're apparently the only two that are gonna go on this camping trip with Fairley. So they're like, and Fairley had told Nichols' boss the same thing that he told him and Harold's boss. Um, so it's really funny. It's just like this whole episode was kind of funny. It's just anyway. Back at Callan and Fern's house, Callan is upset because Fern has spent a good what he says is like half of rent's pay on like extravagant food for breakfast. Um, and she made this for James, but he comes in saying, "Well, I have some interviews to go on today," um, and just leaves. Um, then it goes back to Harold Nichols um, trying to get Fairley to tell them why he's invited them on a camping trip, only for him to say he um, will only tell them when they get to where they're going. And this is a recurring thing where Harold Nichols try to force Fairley to try to tell them why he's, getting them out on this camping trip, to tell them something important. Um, and once the car is stopped, Harold Nichols speculate that, all these different things about why he has brought them out there. Like, is he in a relationship? Is he gay? Does he have cancer? All this stuff. And I'm just sitting here thinking, Pharaoh's gonna get their asses killed because he couldn't have just brought them to like some, uh, you know, other place to do some bonding and all that. Um, so when they stopped their hike, roll, um, along the way, before they get to their camping spot for the night, Nichols tells Harold that the fake name on the passport of Max Zorich's um, passport was Jack Shepherd, who was an English highwayman. And Nichols is like, well, the person who put that name on there seemed to have a sense of humor, which reminded Nichols of Harold. So Nichols is like, well, why haven't you asked if they found anything about Tanya yet? And Harold's like, well, look, I figured if you found something, you would have told me by now. Um, so Nichols reveals that they're getting pressure to find out what really happened to Max Zorich. So they're continuing to dig in and like not close the case essentially. Um, then we go back to James, who's actually going to the police station, not off to go do interviews, so I can get the phone he left in Max's car. He follows a woman he sees exiting the police station who had put her key card in her purse, swipes it, and goes to evidence to get the phone, only to find out that Nichols has already checked it out. Then pretty much the rest of the episode after this point is, except for like one other little thing, is about Nichols Fairley and Harrow in the woods. So, Nichols is about to use the lake, pee outside and stuff when he sees a house, but are interrupted by this so-called like park ranger. The park ranger tries to get them to, leave before actually letting them, be on their way in the woods and stuff. So we then see Grace at her ex-husband's house, and she finds out that he was offered a job in Brisbane, and she looks upset, which I don't quite understand because like she looks mad about that, and I don't really understand why because later she confronts him about it, and he's like, why do you care? We're getting divorced. And it's like, really, why do you care? Why are you so mad if y'all both are getting fucking divorced? I would understand if like y'all were trying to work it out and he just all of a sudden decides to take a job in another part of the country. I would understand that, but y'all literally getting fucking divorced. And you even said at the end of the fucking episode, you would signed the divorce papers. So why the hell are you mad? I don't get it. I don't know. It's that seemed very weird that she would be that upset over her soon to be ex husband getting another job somewhere else. Anyway, so back to, Fairly Harrow Nichols. They get to in the beginning of the episode when they first got to the woods. Fairly said that they were gonna go 4 kilometers in one direction to to hike and stuff, and they get to the halfway point by now, and Fairly finds out that Nichols only posed for those pictures on his dating profile. He's not actually an expert outdoorsman, and that's something up to this point has been brought up consistently, is that by Fairly that Nichols is an expert outdoorsman and all this shit. So later that night, they kind of settle the differences, and they talk about how some like particularly Nichols, he has been twice divorced, a daughter that won't talk to him, and he explains that who would want to talk to somebody who is an old cop and has a dinky knee and stuff. So that's why he made that essentially fake profile. Then, while they're drinking and singing, this man comes up saying that they shot me and he hasn't found his body yet. And that he was shot a long time ago and he leaves before Harrow can actually have him or Fairly check him out. So, oh, I also forgot that the next morning someone comes by to deliver a package for James, but she was just seeing if he was there, and she reports back to him man in the van that I assume she stole, that Fern is there as well. So, back at the campsite, Harrow wakes up to Nichols snoring in his ear in his tent, and finds Fairly and his tidy whities outside the tent. And it's just like everything in this episode was just so funny. It's just like Um, they then, start their hike towards the waterfall, where Fairly says they will swim there, um, buck ass naked and shit. So, um, Harrow then tries, again to tell him what's wrong, but he still refuses. And it was at this point where I was thinking, you know what? Watch that he's planning on retiring. Like, watch he's gonna do that. Um, so Harrow then gets a signal on his cell phone, looks up the man they met the night before, and finds out that the man had gone missing 3 years prior. Um, and he was about to be brought in for questioning for bringing in illegal plants. Um, so Nickel was like, you know what, I'm going back to the car because I can't deal with all this secrecy and these ghost men popping up everywhere. And but before he can, Nichols finds a plant that isn't native to the area. It's the cocoa plant that is native to Peru, and the missing botanist had just come back from Peru um, before he disappeared. Um, Harrow notices that the plant's height matches how long the botanist has been missing, and he finds the remains of what he thinks is a missing botanist. Harrow theorizes that the man ingested the cocoa plant sometime before he died, and it was almost out of his system when he was killed, which is why the plant grew through his pelvis. Um, he also noticed that he had a bullet wound that went through him, like straight through him. Um, and that's when bullets start flying and all of that, and um, they're taken by gunpoint not only by the guy who was shooting at them, but that fake ranger and all that stuff. Um, so it's then that he realizes that the park ranger was just he was just impersonating one, and that they were growing cocaine and stuff like that. And then we find out they both shot another person along with the botanist. The person they shot was the botanist's brother. And Harrow, and so they ask Harrow and Nichols where the Fairley went, and Harrow tries to lie, saying Fairley is his expert bushman, but then sees Fairley up on this like little loft part, and stuff like that, and Fairley's like keep him stalled so that he can use the alcohol, the other big thing of alcohol he brought over, um, to be used as a Molotov cocktail. But before she can continue stalling, Fairley causes the thing to crash and break apart before he can get it lit. But then Harrow and Nichols manage to disarm the two men anyway by kind of breaking the chairs they're tied to apart, and um, stuff like that. So they're arrested, and all that stuff. And then the botanist that they met the night before turns out actually wasn't killed. Only his brother was murdered, and he has this like condition where he believes that either part of his body or it is missing, or he's actually dead, and that's why he couldn't find his body. Turns out that that's just a condition because brought on by trauma. So then Harold has him checked out by paramedics and all that stuff, and then so they then get back to the to Quiffum, and barely, or not before that, they get back to the car, and Fairley tells them that they decided to retire. And I was like, I knew it. So now back at Quiffum, Grace, Harrow, and Fairley find out that Max Zorch's body is being autopsied again, by the insistence of his mother. And it's being autopsied by this guy that Fairley and Harrow used to know, and all that. So that's the end of the episode. Next on Harrow, Max looks to have punched someone in the face with his right hand. And Harrow remembers that James had a bruise on his left cheek where Max's right hand would have collided with. And he realizes that he had that bruise the first night they met. And then also Harrow and Grace get the case of a young woman who died in a car crash, who or a car accident, who this older gentleman says that she's a drunk. And I'm assuming this older gentleman had a child who was killed by this young woman because she was drunk. So I'm thinking with this particular like self-contained mystery in next week's episode or this week's episode, this young woman, she had gotten sober, but then she witnessed something or found something out about somebody where she was killed over it. And so she was forced to drink alcohol because this person knew of her past of being drunk while driving. And so that's why she was killed. I believe that's what's going on, at least with that. As far as James, I still don't believe that he is Harrow's son. I think he met Tanya, knew about the child that she and Harrow had, and decided to impersonate this child, and all the while claiming to Harrow, Tanya's dead, and so that's why, that's why you can't, reach out to her because she's dead, which I don't believe. I think she's still alive and well. I think so. So, and I think somehow again, maybe Fern's gonna end up being framed for something, and she's gonna get framed by James, or maybe even Callan's gonna get framed for something. Also, with this whole fairly retiring thing, I don't think he's going to retire. Like, we're going to see him retire right away. I think what's going to happen is he's going to end up retiring by the end of this season, in the season finale. And that's why we won't see him in like season 4 or something. That's really all I have for like predictions. Like I said, I think I mentioned this last video, but I think Tanya's going to end up coming back or popping up, and she's going to, she's going to reveal that James isn't who he says he is, but I don't think that's going to happen until maybe episode 6 or 7, because it's only episode 4 so far, so I don't think that's going to happen until towards the end of the season. But yeah, that's all I really have for this episode, and I will see you guys next week.